Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Now, this particular audio is for some of the advanced students in the class. They've asked us to drill down on Cambridge Analytica, George Soros, and some other topics. So we put a link in the description box that will show you the 5 articles that we gave as homework assignments for our advanced students to look over. We asked them to read those articles. And so now Thomas is going to explain all of the stuff. Now, if you don't like going in the weeds and you don't want to hear the details, fine, just back out. This is not for you.
That's right. Put your hard hats on because this stuff hurts. We gave it an alert before we spoke about it last time. We're going to give the same alert, but we're now going to give more details. I went way too fast last time. Why? Because this is the most important issue happening in actually the whole world. Trump's number one issue is not fighting even China or North Korea. It's fighting the mainstream media. It's fighting the lies. It's fighting the attacks. These are attacks both from inside his own federal agencies and the mainstream media, and corporate groups like the group that we have revealed, the SCL, the Strategic Communications Laboratories, Stefan Halpern connected to them right on up to the Privy Council of the Queen of England. And this is sad to know that they've permeated also the Senate Intelligence Committee because of the recent indictment for the leak of James Wolfe and his... Again, it's always sex that seems to get these guys in trouble, whether it be Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, or whether it be poor James Wolfe and Allie Watkins. Is that her name?
You mean Zoe Barnes?
Zoe Barnes.
Frank Underwood? But, I mean, it's just like, it happens on the screen and it's played out in life and vice versa. But we know the players, so continue to go deeper, Thomas.
The guy who helped found SCL, Alexander Nix, got in trouble because he said that he was able to create mass deception through this type of psyops, this type of cyber warfare taken into the realm of elections. And he said that his favorite thing was to honeypot, frame them with the honeypot, he said. In other words, sex scandals. And so this is one of their specialties. But right now we're going to talk a little bit about the things that we posted so that those who did their homework and read those articles will be able to have the perspective. I went into most of this in a general fashion the last time we spoke and gave you an alert on this, but the alert here is about the end of free speech. If Article 13 is passed by George Soros's European Union, then that will be the end of free speech, and then there'll be either a redo of Brexit, or there'll be another vote. Because George Soros has now pointed out that a billionaire that, just like him, likes to interfere in elections, this billionaire does have connections to Russia. But of course, Soros says everything that isn't Soros is Russia. If you're against Soros, you're Russian. And so what he's saying is this guy named Aaron Banks put in billions for the Brexit vote. And of course, the Brexit vote did not go George Soros's way, so Britain wants to withdraw from the European Union. But now he's creating a scam over the intervention of supposed Russian in that vote, so the vote has to be redone. And as we told you, he now has tens of thousands of people on the street going door to door to tell them to get ready for a new vote. Well, nobody said there's going to be a new vote, but George Soros is convinced there is. And this is his number one way to create chaos so he can sweep in as an economic terrorist in any country. As we listed to you, made a list for you of about 20 color revolutions that he's involved in. So the articles we gave you show the way that we, Americans, not only SCL, but our own President Obama put down over $1,350,000 to try to stop Benjamin Netanyahu from being elected in Israel when Obama was president. This is quite standard. We actually spent $5 billion in Ukraine from 1990 on up through 2 revolutions, One that George Soros is proud that he led in Ukraine, called the Orange Revolution in 2004, to take out a duly elected new president whose name is Viktor Yanukovych, who Paul Manafort worked with. And it is that association that, they're trying to say Manafort is connected to Russians, but he's not. He's connected to a Ukrainian who was in fact pro-Europe, pro-American. So what happened was he got elected in 2004, but Soros didn't like that. So believe it or not, now this is going to shock some of you, but Victoria Nuland literally yelled one day that she didn't spend $2.7 billion for the Orange Revolution to have Viktor Yanukovych again be elected president in 2010. So then by 2014, Victoria Nuland's billions of dollars, and she was an assistant under Secretary of State, and later had even higher positions. She was the person who made sure that a second revolution called the Euromaidan Revolution in Ukraine would take out Viktor Yanukovych a second time. And she was yelling that she had spent billions of dollars to do this. Now you might say, wait a second, how did she do this? Well, look at the pictures in the article. She even went over there. She went over there with John McCain. They were supporting these fascists, these neo-Nazis, and they even still, raised their hand up like Heil Hitler. And they were the same party called the Party of Regions that supported Hitler. So these guys are fascists. The Antifa flag is taken from the Ukrainian Party of Regions. And, of course, Biden was over there on the stage with these neo-Nazis. They're not even neo-Nazis. They're real Nazis. But anyway, just call it the Party of Regions is what it is, but they're fascists. And he got his son, Hunter Biden, a really nice position, a paid position on their largest gas the board for their liquid gas, though he knows nothing about that. And so what we see here is that they're trying to turn Ukraine into a new Russia that is ruled by mafias and oligarchs who they can then control. And if they can get the central people involved in American deals, then that's good for America. But what really happened there was that caused Russia, because of the pipelines coming through Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan and other places, Uzbekistan, coming through Russia and then through Ukraine stopped that. And they tried to put a very large tax on it, and Russia turned it off. So they had this fight back and forth. That's what's really going on there. It's always about oil pipelines in Europe at this point. So when you look at what needed to happen in Russia, well, first off, SCL was involved in America because they got basically an $86 million contract with the Global Engagement Center, which is part of the Department of Defense Board of Broadcasting Governors, to propagandize Americans. So SCL was very active, but it was supporting the Democrats. But another branch, the Cambridge Analytica, which is another branch of SCL in America, there's many versions of it in Europe and all throughout the world, but they also have versions here in America. Both those companies went bankrupt. And it's SCL in Europe, one of their SCL elections went bankrupt because they affect elections. They say they've swayed 60 countries, 100 elections, 44 elections in America, and they send over foreigners to assist in elections to basically do psyops attacks on targeted people that they're trying to sway in an election. This all should be illegal now. Of course, all of you are saying, well, wait a second, why isn't all of this illegal?
Well, that's it.
It should
pointed
be.
out, the NDAA, the way it's written, it's legal to propagandize Americans.
That's right, and that's been in the news again with top people saying that the Council on Foreign Relations saying, oh no, we have to propagandize.
Not right.
We have been propagandizing for a long time. We must propagandize so that whatever current administration's programs are being foisted upon the American public, they need to be psyopsed. They need to be subliminally programmed to accept them.
Because if you all were really awake, educated, enlightened, and saw what we had planned for you, you would run. So they don't want us to know.
That's right. And they're experimenting on places like Yemen. So we showed in that article how SCL, Strategic Communications Laboratories, went into Yemen and did the disinformation service for a U.S. company called Archimedes, who worked directly for Barack Obama because Barack Obama's targeted bombing was all based upon information gathered by SCL. Now, you might say, wait a second, why didn't we use our own military? Because when you're doing illegal stuff, America likes to use one of the Five Eyes. Britain oftentimes. So they use these British companies, whether they be corporate intelligence or the British intelligence. It doesn't matter. For instance, in Syria, the reports of gas both times were from a British company called 63, which is owned by CACI, which is owned by Serco, which is actually a British company, which wasn't even on the ground in Syria. And so we had false information from a group called the Syrian Humanitarian Advanced Observers. And that's how the decision was made for people who aren't even on the ground, who we're receiving this from Brits. Yes, that's the way these things work. So this happens a lot, and it's been happening a lot. And that's the reason there's political opposition groups like Fusion GPS that are allowed to do what they do, or the Podesta brothers, or
Manafort, Stone, and whoever they were.
Kelly and Stone, Manafort, Kelly, and Black, whoever. These different groups. And now we have, of course, Daniel Jones, Dianne Feinstein's
assistant,
intelligence assistants from the Senate Intelligence Committee that is under so much scrutiny right now because of the horrible things that they've been found out to have done early on to create the Steele dossier. But anyway, what we find out is that this is normal, and so Daniel Jones comes out, creates his own company, gets $50 million from a Russian, Oleg Deripaska, doesn't bother anybody, and continues to hammer on Trump even after he's the president with this disinformation, with this yellow journalism propaganda, basically the mainstream media just going secret and becoming weaponized. And that's who most of these people are, ex-media people. So this is all over the world. But in Yemen, here we have Obama, the same Obama who paid to try to unseat Benjamin Netanyahu in interfering in their elections, who's complaining about Russia interfering in the 2016 presidential election. Later he said there really was none. Not a single vote was affected by the Russians. Those are his words. So what is really going on? He was involved to help Hillary with a much bigger program.
Who's a he? Because you're talking about
Obama.
A lot of people. Okay, just make sure.
Obama was involved with Hillary and Eric Schmidt, Google, and the algorithms that were written for Hillary, and the template to win the election, which he also paid for, Eric Schmidt paid for, and was used on Facebook. So we had here a huge election meddling going on. And we can say, they try to blame it on Russians because, like in Russia, or George Soros is saying that Russia interfered in French and Italian and German elections because some footprints were left on somebody trying to hack for a phishing campaign. Anyone who leaves footprints is just a liar. They're leaving false footprints. You don't have to leave any footprints anymore because they want to use acrylic, a Russian language keyboard, and then leave the same old footprints that Dmitry Alperovich was using that is so outdated. If anyone believes any of that, then you're just not up to date. So George Soros blames the Russians for all of this election. So now he has not only the fact-checking market cornered, basically a monopoly on fact-checking in Europe, so that the next election for Brexit, if there's going to be one, there might not even be one. He might just say that it's a fraud. And how's he saying it's a fraud? Because a group called Aggregate IQ in Canada, which was a branch of SCL Canada, which is a lie, it never really existed. It was a fake dummy company, paid, supposedly, George Soros found that this billionaire, Aaron Banks, paid too much money, a little bit more money than was supposed to be paid. And so they looked closely and found that it went out of the country and it went to one company, not to two companies. And so they found an irregularity in the money. So George Soros wants to say they have to do a do-over because he's not going to let it settle. He doesn't accept election results. We told you, color revolutions are usually based upon overturning an election, overturning a duly elected person. The one in America, which we call the Purple Revolution against Trump, We, of course, are conducting this Second American Revolution, which may be still the first American Revolution, we've now found out. But there's revolutions going on, and the Purple Revolution is being led by Robert Mueller and his committee to impeach, his Crossfire Hurricane, his whatever you want to call it. It had a dozen names and a whole lot of collusion between NSA, CIA, FBI, counterintelligence, Department of Justice, National Security Division, and the State Department right into the White House to every major player in the White House. And so what we're seeing is, and what we're trying to tell you is, free speech has already been encroached on to the point that they are attempting to target and manipulate you through psychological warfare that is so subtle and that it is literally subliminal, and it's on a massive scale. And in third world countries, or in countries, for instance, like Yemen, or in Africa, where this has been done over and over and over again, or in Malaysia, they simply can topple governments. Why? To take an economic advantage of a chaos system in their monetary value. Usually it's a currency war. That's what George Soros is a pro at. So what we're telling you is when George Soros, the day after the election, when Trump got elected, Soros lost $1 billion in the stock market because he was so convinced that Trump was going to lose. And basically, there was an article.
Well, I mean, if he knew then what we know now of what they did to stack this election for Hillary, yeah, I'd bet that she would win. If it weren't for good patriots getting to the polls, we would have lost.
$6 billion Soros spent on Obama and Hillary. And he was very, very disappointed that he didn't get Hillary in, because that would have been the fait accompli. That would have been the revolution that would have overthrown America permanently.
And you saw his quote today that everything that's gone wrong has.
Yes.
Yeah, George, what'd you think?
And
he says something about living in a bubble. Yeah, I bet. He needs to tune into independent media and he would find out what's really going on, which brings me to, in these news shows, you have to stop watching them because they program you, they brainwash you, and that includes your beloved Fox News. And let me tell you, what they're doing is they're keeping you from knowing the real truth. They'll tell you a part of the truth and you feel good about it, but there's a certain glass barrier that they never cross because they're keeping you in this little digital box. So break free. Unless they start talking about these things that Thomas is telling you, then they want to keep you in a box.
Fox News is getting ready to be bought by extreme liberal left-wingers. Breitbart was owned by the Mercers, who gave the money to start Strategic Communications Laboratories. Steve Bannon is a paid member of their board. He actually is an owner of SCL, and therefore, subsequently, at least in some part, Cambridge Analytica. So don't believe for a minute that Breitbart, that writes some of the worst articles on our president, is really on the president's side. And don't believe for 1 second that Drudge, which presents more negativity about Trump than positivity, is in any way really on Trump's side. The only way you're going to get Trump is to go to Trump tweets and to work with what Brad Parscale is putting out with the 500-day report, or what he is doing a very good job on, presenting these little videos that really show you that Trump is the best president that we've had in modern times. Now, let's go back. George Soros has a new plan. And so you probably saw this and you probably were shocked. You got to hear Angela Merkel say that she is no longer into having the refugees invade her country or Europe, that she wants to send them back in the droves, 500,000 at a time. And you're going, wait a second, this is the woman who caused all of this by inviting them. And because she didn't send a ship to get them, they all crossed other countries in the European Union and caused sheer havoc and an invasion that may not even be able to be stayed. It may not be able to be turned. But anyway, she says she wants them out, exactly like the other 28 European Union nations that spoke up and said this a few days ago in Brussels, saying they got to go, or else if the migrants and the refugees, the invaders don't go, in 5 years there'll be no Europe. There'll be no nations in Europe, and there'll be no Europe. Well, here's the deal. We're the only ones telling you this. George Soros paid for every one of those boats. He paid for every one of those people to come into Europe. Now, that may be a shock to you, but I challenge anyone to find a picture of anybody giving them aid that came from the Red Cross or anywhere else that was recognized. What you're going to see is the aid that was given looks like Halliburton provided it. It looked like a private service. That was George Soros. Why did George Soros do this? He did it to destabilize Europe so that he could take advantage of the European Union, the euro. He wanted to have complete control of the European Union Central Bank, but it failed. And it failed because countries like Greece and other countries, went into bankruptcy, and he didn't understand. Yes, he was living in a bubble. So what's the new plan? Here's the new plan. Just like Libya said, no more. No more. You're not going to leave from our ports. Now George Soros...
No, not Libya, Italy.
From Libya to Italy.
Okay.
And Italy said you can't come to our ports anymore.
Right.
And even said what you just told me, which I didn't know.
They said, hey, you can stop off at Malta. They'll take them.
I love that.
I wonder how the Knights of Malta will feel about that.
Yeah. The Knights of Malta are the largest supposed charity in the world. How come there are no refugees in Malta?
In fact, all you guys in Italy, and I know we have listeners in Italy, just ship them all to Malta.
And so they're turning away the ships from Italy and from other places. And they're turning away George Soros' ships because really that makes George Soros a murderer, doesn't it? Because thousands of people died on those ships because of unsafe conditions, and he paid for them. That makes him a murderer. He should be arrested for that.
Who's going to arrest him?
This is an international
crime
against humanity that he tried to hide that he was the person behind this. Now, what does he say? He says in Libya or someplace in North Africa, they need to establish a refugee camp where the European Union needs to pay $60 billion a year to keep the North Africans in North Africa. Now, what does that mean? He said, when they all said to him...
He wants to be paid to stop doing what he's doing.
Correct. And if they do stop, then he doesn't have to put out the money. And then what does he do? He simply gets the deal. And the deal is $60 billion a year. And he's going to get them the credit. He's going to arrange it. That's what he told the European Union. So now that he's broken the back of the European Union, this is a man who at age 14, he says that the greatest time of his life was when he was 14, going around with his uncle, hiding the fact that he was a Jew, and going into Jewish homes in Hungary under the basically the auspices of Nazism, and confiscating their goods, taking them to the black market and selling it, and then using that with I believe it was his uncle, but it was a relative. And he said that he stole from his uncle, and so he took stolen money from a person who stole it, who sold it on the black market, to use it to build up the cash, to build up an empire that he started at age 14 based upon breaking the backs of his own relatives, in some cases who were Jews that he then saw go off to the concentration camps to die. But he said that was the best time of his life.
Yes, and and you have these liberal newspapers, and they say, George Soros, Holocaust survivor.
The only person I know now, I'm going to tell you something else, which is very speculative, but it seems quite true, that because of these color revolutions and because of people like Sir Geoffrey Patty, who has been part of Bell Pottinger's PR, basically, again, election control, which later then evolved with the Mercer's money into SCL, which was the mother company of Cambridge Analytica, and does all this evil, even goes into Russia. I didn't get into the Russian article, but the sanctions Obama put on Russia, and SCL, and your standard groups. Your standard groups go in, and they go underneath the names of the National Endowment for Democracy, the International Republic Institute, the MacArthur Foundation, the Freedom House, the Open Society, the Tides Foundation, and they go even into Russia. They all had to be kicked out of Russia. And then the SCL and others continued in Russia to attack Putin and eventually, and try to support this demand that eventually had to be put in jail. And then Putin said, yeah, you did interfere. You interfered in all these different ways, but I still got through it. Now remember, SCL was also involved in Ukraine in both of the revolutions, the Orange Revolution and the Euromaidan Revolution. Now, if that's the case, and people were shot and killed in the Euromaidan Revolution, that means SCL is complicit in the murder of those people. And again, people are dying in these revolutions. And we heard people here in America saying, we heard Loretta Lynch, we heard Eric Holder, we heard Al Sharpton, we even heard our own ex-President Obama saying people have to get out in the street and people may have to die. And in some cases they said, Loretta Lynch said people will have to die. And that's just incredible to think that the SEL connection and those type of election rigging connections make people think that they can really overthrow American democracy. Let me just throw out one more thing, and then...
That word that was slurred together is American democracy?
American democracy. Is that, I slurred the words?
Oh, it was going really fast.
Okay. Yes, they tried to overthrow American democracy. And I'm just going to point out one more thing to show you how bad it was. Recently, a document has come out where someone said in multiple conversations that from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, said that even after Trump was elected, that he was going to go to the Supreme Court and present evidence to show that Trump had not been duly elected because of the Russian interference. As we know, there was no Russian interference, but that's how far James Clapper was willing to go to the Supreme Court and lie, like he always does, and state that Trump was not duly elected because of some fictitious election meddling. The only election meddling was from the Democrats, and it was Russian. Oleg Deripaska's money that he gave to Daniel Jones is proof of that. The hiring of Sergei Milikin, Felix Sater, the use of Carter Page, the use of Joseph Mifsud, the use of Stephen Halper, and the entire British intelligence community, it looks like, all the way up to literally Boris Johnson, basically their Secretary of State. This was well known at all levels of the highest echelon in these very groups, the SCL groups, that have also penetrated Ukraine twice with revolutions and supported George Soros revolution. So we speculate George Soros was somehow connected to that group, and or even back before that group even existed, when it was called other things. But these type of election riggings, these type of destabilizations for currency, economic terrorism, this is standard operating procedure for these people. We must create new election laws that drive all corporations out of any donations, whether they be through super PACs or any other illegal fashions. Every candidate should receive the same amount of money coming from the taxpayers and receive public service announcement times.
But then everybody
period.
would want to run for office because everybody's going to get the same amount of money.
Everyone should run for office. But they have to take a test first to see that they know our history.
This is getting so complicated.
If they're going to create laws, why shouldn't they be tested? Aren't you tested as a teacher? Aren't you continuously tested? Don't you have to take full credits, more credits all the time just to remain a teacher or to be accredited as a doctor?
That's a discussion for another day.
Politicians should be trained in how our system works and in what their job is, because right now they seem to have forgotten. They think corporate donations and lobbies and where they're getting their next money for their next election is all that matters, not their constituency, not truth. For instance, the largest donations to the U.S. Congress and the Senate comes from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce that launders money from all kinds of foreign nations and then gives it to the leadership of the Democrats and the Republicans in the Senate and the Congress, and then they filter it out to those who vote the way that they tell them to vote. Did you understand what I just told you? China, Russia, Bill Browder, don't get me started on all the Russian oligarchs that have become British citizens so that they can donate. Blavatnik, the largest, Soros. Okay, these are the worst people in the world who are the largest donors, and then they filter it through a legal system that then a Paul Ryan can say, you'll vote for DACA, or I'm not giving you money for your election in 2008, this coming fall. I'm just going to, because they can hold back the major sources of money of the people who they control. how is that in any way living in a true, free democracy, Republican system that supports the U.S. Congress than the Bill of Rights? I don't think it is. I think it's simply buying off the politicians, and we need to get corporations and foreign agents out of that completely.
So let's get back to these articles. Was there anything else that we should have taken away from them for our homework?
Well, if you read them, then you would have seen how deep it is and that it verified everything that we were saying. Because I had said some things that went pretty fast, and I'm saying them again tonight in a much more measured fashion because I want you to hear it again after you read the article to say, oh my goodness, everything that he's saying is true. Because we do not have a time to write, we do not have time to write you a full Anonymous Patriots intelligence report that is vetted by the conclave in all aspects about Article 13, which is going to lose freedom of speech in Europe, which is also coming here. Here it is now called Google's program, which the government bought, which I doubt President Trump even knows happened, called the Digital News Initiative. And they're going to basically use their computer power to determine if everyone is a homogeneous news agency. And if they are not, they will simply obliterate them. They will knock them out of existence. Just like we saw that Facebook says, oh no, we're not a news agency. And we're not even really truly responsible for what we post. I mean, we are, but we aren't. And then what happens? They buy CNN. Basically. In other words, they save CNN from bankruptcy by making them their exclusive news agency.
And they know that
more or
the
less.
average citizen out here is not paying attention, nor do we have the resources to even challenge this anymore. So this is another reason why you need to be alert to who is providing you with your daily news.
It's just like when Trump was asked the question at the G7. He knew by the way the nasty, twisted up, accusatory, defamatory question was asked that it had to be CNN fake news. They can't even ask a question that's straight. They can't report a thing that's straight. Why do they exist? Because they are one of these opposition political research groups that simply creates fake news, just like the Russian dossier or just like the Papadopoulos counterintelligence investigation, Crossfire Hurricane. All these things are fake news. This is yellow journalism. William Randolph Hearst would be proud of the way yellow journalism has become so pervasive. But what happened? It went too far. Fake news went too far. And now they're caught with their pants down. I don't think they will ever get back the people they've lost. And every single day they lose people because every single day the lies mount up. So if they continue, people continue to watch that stuff, they're so brainwashed, I don't know if they took the red pill, if they would survive, to be quite frank with you.